Test 1, 2. Check 1 2, check 1 2, 1 2, check 1 2. Check 1 2, check 1 2. Check 1 2, check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2. One two one two. Check 1 2. 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. 1 2. Check 1 2. 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. 1 2. Check 1 2. 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2. 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2. 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If I could ask members of council to take their seats and members of the public to take their seats, we'll start the meeting in 1 minute. On va commencer la réunion dans 1 minute. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs, et bienvenue à la Conseil municipal.
Welcome to the City Council meeting of September 14th, 2016.
Meeting of the 14th of September, 2016. If those who are able to could please rise for a moment of reflection and remain standing as we introduce our special guests who will sing the national anthem. You could remain standing. We'll ask our colleague Eli El-Shantiri to introduce some very special guests who are here to sing our national anthem.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure, Mr. Mayor, to introduce to you a member of the West Carleton Glee Club who will be singing the national anthem today. So the West Carleton Glee Club has 40 members. We didn't bring them all this morning, Mr. Mayor. We only brought 25 of them. And it is directed under the teacher, also resident of Kinburn, Jennifer Britton. Jennifer had to leave home 6 o'clock this morning to get at City Hall on time. Members of the Glee Club are children from grade 1 to grade 8. Students meet once a week to practice different songs leading up to the final concert. So today they're going to sing to us the national anthem, and I'm looking forward to hear from them, Mr. Mayor. They're great children, and I think a few of them even from Stittsville here with us this morning. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Britton.
Well, that was terrific. Thank you very, very much, Councillor El-Shantiri, for inviting these special guests from West Carleton. And as you mentioned, I think even some came in from Stittsville, Shad, without a passport. So it's great to see no wall being built between Stittsville and West Carleton, and great cooperation. They're a great addition to our meeting this morning. At this time, I'd like to welcome a special guest who is going to receive the Mayor's City Builder Award. Reverend Joseph Kiria would come forward at this point. He has many family and friends here from his ministry, along with his counselor, Keith Eglai. J'invite aussi son conseiller.
I would like to invite his Councillor Keith Eglai to join us today.
For being here, and thank you for coming with so many friends and family who are here to support and congratulate you. Reverend Joseph is a St. Paul University graduate and a dedicated community leader. He is founder of the River Jordan Ministry in Nepean, a non-denominational, cross-cultural, and multi-generational ministry. This year, the ministry celebrates an amazing 10 years of offering a home away from home to all immigrants living in Ottawa. Cette année, le ministère célébrait une magnifique réalisation.
This year, the ministry celebrates an amazing 10 years of offering a home away from home to all immigrants living in Ottawa.
Reverend Joseph has dedicated himself and his efforts to serve Ottawa's immigrant population. Through his ministry, he mentors newcomers or helps by providing a message of hope and inspiration. And one of the ways Reverend Joseph achieves this is through volunteering at the Somerset West Community Centre, where he provides vital support for members of the African and Caribbean communities. Reverend Joseph is also a member of the Love Ottawa executive team, and a number of members are here. I don't want to point out one, but we have Jerry Organ, who Grey Cup winner for the Ottawa Rough Riders, that amazing 40-year anniversary we had at Lansdowne. Thank you, Jerry, for being here with your colleagues from Love Ottawa, which is a citywide team representing one-way ministries which strive to build and foster relationships for Ottawa's residents. Through Love Ottawa, Reverend Joseph is also actively involved with Unity Front and Youth at Risk. These two initiatives inspire individuals to make the most opportunities available to them within their community. Thank you, Reverend Joseph, very much for your stewardship of new Canadians and dedication to your community. And on behalf of Councillor Eglai and myself and my colleagues on City Council, it's my pleasure to present you with the Mayor City Builder Award. Congratulations. Come on over here and get a picture, okay? Let's get behind. You get in the middle. There we go.
Thank you so much, Mayor Jim Watson, City Councillors, for this award. It highlights your commitment to the people that you are serving, particularly immigrant communities who are inspired by this award, knowing that we are not a marginalized group, but we are a people that are of concern to your office. I want to particularly appreciate Councillor Keith Eglai for your continued support in working with me on my commitment to support single mothers, to support youth at risk, and to support newcomers to help them integrate well and integrate fast in our community. We have seen many great success stories, and we are right now working on a program called The Code with the Love Ottawa team, a program that is aimed at mentoring and coaching young black male as we collectively seek to address the problem of guns violence in the city. This award ideally is dedicated to my family, my wife, and my children, who have always allowed me the opportunity to be available to serve my community. This award is also dedicated to the single mothers who are working tirelessly day and night to raise up their sons and daughters, and sometimes don't even have the privilege of seeing those sons graduate. To the contrary, they always have the unfortunate news of hearing that their son is involved in a crime and may be spending many years of his life behind bars. I congratulate you for your strength, for your courage to continue mothering and continue believing the best in your children. This award is also dedicated to members of the Love Ottawa team, men who have come alongside me to support me, to mentor me, to help me realize the dreams and the vision that I have for the vulnerable members of our community. Lastly, I want to thank God, whose love for me is the inspiration behind what I do. I thank you so much for this honor. I am humbled, and I pray that we shall have many more opportunities, not only to receive awards, but to sit at table with you and discuss matters that are pertinent to the communities that I serve, particularly the matter of the Youth Mentoring Initiative through the Love Ottawa that is called the Code. This is very dear to my heart, and we hope that we can have opportunity to discuss this with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Reverend Joseph and Councillor Eglai, and members of your congregation and family. It's now my pleasure to preside over a handoff ceremony of last year's United Way co-chairs to this year's United Way co-chairs. And I'd ask Michael Allen, CEO of United Way, to come forward, Charles Bordelot, Chief of Police, outgoing co-chair, Danya Vered, outgoing co-chair, Frank Bilodeau, incoming co-chair, and Kathleen Kemp, incoming co-chair, to come forward. Welcome. Bienvenue. Just yesterday, Michael, I was speaking at the Canadian Border Services Canadian Border Services organization's kickoff the United Way. They had it right here at Jean Piggott Place, so we're back in the United Way mood here in Ottawa. And as we all know, the United Way is a key community partner and driving force in our city who strives to keep our communities healthy and welcoming for all residents. Cette année, Centraide a investi.
This year, United Way has invested in more than 110 programs and other initiatives that support the most vulnerable people in our city.
People with disabilities, those facing mental health and addiction issues, or more, the United Way is a vital community partner for those in need. This is thanks to the $15.8 million raised by the many generous donors in our city, including many contributions made by our own employees right here at the City of Ottawa. Les dons de la personnel de ville fait
the donations made by the city contribute to the whole City of Ottawa.
And support network for many of our city's most vulnerable. It's my pleasure to be here today to thank the outgoing campaign chairs, Chief of Police Charles Bordelot and Danya Vered, for their outstanding leadership and dedication to our community. As someone who chaired the United Way campaign several years ago, I know the time commitment that is involved. In addition to busy lives and busy professions, you took on this added responsibility of leadership, and for that the community thanks you. J'ai maintenant le plaisir de les...
Now I would like to invite the new co-chairs of the 2016 United Way campaign.
And take the podium.
Well, thank you very much, Your Worship, members of council, city staff, guests. Thank you very much for having us here this morning. It was almost a year ago that Danya and I officially launched the United Way campaign as co-chairs, and let me just say what an inspiring and momentous year it has been. As someone who spent my entire career in the service of the community, taking on the role of one of the co-chairs for the United Way campaign was an honor and quite a natural extension of my role as your Chief of Police.
What changed for me over the year was the way in which I was associated with all the aspects of United Way work.
Was the training that I did with the kids of the Russell Heights Community Centre for my half marathon during the Tamarack Ottawa race weekend in support of United Way. I was running with kids like Caroline, Edwin, and Morgan, who rely on the Russell Heights Community House, a United Way partner in Alta Vista Ward. I and many others ran the race so that these kids could have someone safe to go to learn and grow. L'expérience m'a permis de tisser les liens.
This experience allowed me to establish relationships with kids and to help them in school and in life. You need small moments like this over the campaign, and they will stay with me.
The Chief and I have had a really impactful journey so far, from early morning workplace launches to community events like the Gen Next Schmooze Fest to visiting homework clubs around the city. We've had a lot of fun doing a lot of really good work together this year. This experience has certainly shown me the need that exists here in our city, and also the dedication, compassion, and commitment that exists among those who want to help make our neighborhoods and our communities stronger together. From ward to ward, the work of United Way can be seen in every corner of the community. I mean, we have the important investments that United Way makes in 211, where a member of our community can connect with someone to find help, and available social service resources in our city, or United Way's investments in the Distress Center. There's also the work and investments made by United Way to help bridge the gap for people with disabilities in reaching their employment goals. These investments are crisscrossing our city and are there to help our fellow neighbors be stronger as a community. I'm proud of our accomplishments during the campaign, and it's an honor to say that we played an important part in helping United Way reach its goal to change the lives of 57,000 people in the City of Ottawa this year. The Chief and I wish to thank the City's co-chairs, Dan Chenier and Lisa Allaire, for leading the City's United Way campaign. They, along with an army of dedicated individuals from all departments, are the true heroes of your campaign. So we wish to ask those who are present to stand up so that we can acknowledge them.
So now it's the time for us to pass on the torch. The two people that are taking our place are amazing people who have contributed so much to our community already. I'd like to call upon our 2016-2017 campaign co-chairs, Frank Bilodeau, District Vice President, Ottawa and West Quebec, Scotiabank, and Kathleen Kemp, Director of Social Enterprise Development at the Centre for Innovative Social Enterprise Development. So Frank and Kathleen, you want to join us here at the podium? So as a symbolic gesture, Daniel and I would like to present to you, it's a map of the city, and it's something to remind you how large the city is, and to the thousands of people that you will reach out and touch through the help of United Way in the next year's campaign. So here you go, and congratulations.
Oh, yeah.
Alors, je vous remercie, Daniel.
Thank you, Dania and Chief Bordelot, for everything you've done. Kathleen and myself are honored to take over and to continue the excellent work that you've done.
I have had the privilege of working with United Way Ottawa as board chair. As such, I've had a tremendous opportunity to work with wonderful and dedicated volunteers, including representatives from the City of Ottawa, Councillors Mark Taylor and Mathieu Fleury. There we go. Fine examples of how the City of Ottawa and United Way are key municipal partners with a deep and long-standing relationship focused on helping those who truly need it most in our community. Je m'en voudrais de ne pas mentionner
I would be remiss if I were not to underline the work of Scotiabank within United Way. The fact that the bank has allowed me to co-chair this campaign shows this renewed commitment. I am honored to represent my organization in this fashion.
Alongside the extraordinary Kathleen Kemp. Together, I am confident that we will make this campaign a success. Kathleen and I truly look forward to working with the City of Ottawa's campaign committee. I'd like now to invite Kathleen to say a few words.
Good morning. I represent the next generation of people contributing to our community. I was recently recognized as the with the United Way as their inaugural Gen Next Community Builder of the Year Award for my work with social enterprise, an emerging and flourishing sector within the nonprofit sector. United Way supports several social enterprises, particularly those that are helping new Canadians and people with disabilities. I'm excited to learn more about this work and the other work I'll discover through this campaign throughout the community. I've had a vested interest in helping vulnerable people, and in particular, speaking out about mental health and empowering people within our greater community. It's for this reason I've been compelled to explore the possibilities of mixing business with social good, and it's what set me on the path that I'm on today. So I embrace the opportunity wholeheartedly, and I look forward to seeing everyone on September 29th at United Way's launch at the Aberdeen Pavilion. Thank you.
On behalf of the City of Ottawa and my colleagues on City Council, we want to thank again Co-Chairs Dania and Chief Bordelot. And as a token of the City and the United Way's appreciation, we present you with this gift, which represents the wonderful work you have done in the community. I'd also like to congratulate Frank and Kathleen. Michael Allen tells me Kathleen is the youngest co-chair in the history of the United Way campaign, and the previous youngest was this old guy named Matt Fleury over there. Je remercie Frank et Kathleen et je leur souhaite bon.
Thank you to Kathleen and to Frank.
Alan, thank you for your leadership. Remember, this is the United Way season to be generous and to give. Literally tens of thousands of people in our community are relying on the generosity of the people of Ottawa to help them get a little bit ahead in life, help them to make a better life for their families and their communities. So we're very proud of the work the United Way does. The City of Ottawa is proud to be a partner, but we all have our collective responsibility to dig a little deeper in these challenging economic times to help those less fortunate than ourselves. Thank you very much. Merci. In July of this year, City Manager Steve Kanellakis presented a new organizational structure and senior leadership team. En juillet de cette année, le directeur municipal Steve Kanellakis a...
July of this year, our City Director Steve Kanellakis presented a new senior management team. This structure has been unanimous.
Leadership team has renewed accountability to Council and all of the residents of the City. I'm pleased to see they are taking an active role by all being present here today, and I know that this guidance and leadership will not only help Council, but all members of our community. Je suis heureux de constater que...
I'm very pleased to see that they are playing an active role, and they are all here today, and I hope that their recommendations and their leadership will not only help Council, but also all the members of our community.
A large task ahead of them in developing our budget solutions and preparing for a busy and exciting year in 2017. I look forward to their continued collaboration and for their presence with Steve Kanellakis at the table with us today. Roll call, please, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Conseiller Monette.
Present.
Conseiller Minnick.
Present.
Councillor Harder.
Here.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Present.
Councillor El-Shantiri.
Present.
Councillor Kadri.
Present.
Councillor Taylor.
Here.
Councillor Shirelli.
Here.
Councillor Eglai.
Here.
Councillor Deans.
Here.
Councillor Tierney. Councillor Fleury.
Si.
Councillor Nussbaum.
Here.
Councillor McKenney. Present. Councillor Leeper.
Here.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Chernushenko.
Present.
Conseiller Cloutier.
Present.
Conseiller Blais.
Here.
Councillor Derouz.
Here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Councillor Kakish.
Present.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Mayor Watson.
Here.
Le quorum est atteint, Monsieur le Maire.
Merci.
You have quorum.
Considerable confirmation of minutes for the regular meeting of the 31st of August 2016. Carried. Declaration of interest, including those originally arising from prior meetings. Déclaration de conflit d'intérêt. None. Communications as presented. Regrets. Councillor Tierney has informed me that he will be away today on city business representing the city at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Motion to introduce reports. Motion portant présentation de rapport. Councillor Middick, seconded by Councillor Cloutier, please.
Thank you, Mayor. That the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee Report 19 Alpha, Finance and Economic Development Committee Report 17, and the Transportation Committee Report 17 be received and considered, and that pursuant to subsection 35 of Procedure Bylaw 2014-441, Council receive and consider Planning Committee Report 31.
On the motion, carried. Thank you. Committee reports, Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee Report number 19A, rapport numéro 19A du Comité de l'Agriculture des Affaires Rurales, Zoning Bylaw Amendment 4041 Moody Drive, modification de règlement de zonage 4041 Promenade Moody. On the committee recommendation, on the summary of submissions, carried. Finance and Economic Development Committee Report number 17, rapport numéro 17 du Comité des Finances et de Développement économique. Item number 2, 2016 Operating Capital Budget Q2 Status Report. Received. Item 3 is Bell's Corners Community Plan, Improvement Plan, CIP, Plan d'Amélioration Communautaire de Bell's Corners. Carried. Planning Committee Report number 31, rapport numéro 31 du Comité de l'Urbanisme, Zoning Bylaw Amendment 4115 Strandherd Drive, modification de règlement de zonage 4115 Promenade Strandherd. Carried. Transportation Committee Report number 17, Downtown Ottawa Truck Tunnel Feasibility Study. We have a motion, so we'll come back to that. Bulk consent agenda. Does anyone? Councillor Deans.
I'd like to lift item L, Public Transit Infrastructure Program.
Okay. Anything else to be lifted from bulk consent? On bulk consent? Carried. And all right, so we'll go back to our first item, which is the environmental assessment on the Transportation Committee. Councillor Hubley and Moffat have a motion, so we'll entertain the motion, have it tabled first, and then go on to the main report and the motion. Councillor Hubley, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Whereas the Downtown Ottawa Truck Tunnel Feasibility Study outlines various options and considerations for implementing tolling as a means to provide a new source of revenue to pay for infrastructure projects and reduce congestion, and whereas the Transportation Committee has recommended that the Mayor contact the federal and provincial governments on behalf of City Council to discuss next steps relating to the planning and implementation of the Downtown Ottawa Tunnel, with priority for the shared funding for the environmental assessment, and whereas if a downtown tunnel is to proceed as an alternative route for interprovincial truck traffic, one of the next steps would be an environmental assessment study. Therefore, be it resolved that the scope of any future environmental assessment study for the downtown Ottawa traffic tunnel include an exploration of the effects from the variations in volumes utilizing the tunnel, should the proposed tunnel be a toll road, and be it further resolved that if an alternative truck route such as a tunnel is established, staff be directed to explore the feasibility of banning all trucks from the core, with the exception of those making a delivery inside the core. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hubley, and that's seconded by Councillor Moffat. Appreciate that. So on the debate on either the motion or the main report, Councillor Nussbaum, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make a brief comment on the main item, and then I'll just have a brief comment on the motion as well. On the main item, although I don't sit on Transportation Committee, I did attend the meeting because this is an issue of great interest to the whole City of Ottawa, but in particular to residents of my ward. And one of the issues which I raised before the meeting, and Councillor Eglai and I and others had constructive discussions on, related to the concerns I had with regard to the southern portal, essentially the way in which the connection between the tunnel and the 417 happens on the south end. I was encouraged by the fact that the committee approved the language that I had put forward on just making sure that in the next steps we're looking at mitigation measures, modifications to that portal. I think it would be useful to look again at whether or not a direct connection is possible, and if not, what are the other modifications which can be put forward. So I just want to thank the members of the committee for passing that language, and with that change, I'm confident moving ahead that we can address the concerns of the community as we move forward on the tunnel project. As I say, it's an important project for the whole city. With regard to Councillor Hubley's motion, I think the last clause calling on staff to look at the feasibility of banning all trucks from the core, I think that's an excellent idea. I think we want this tunnel to try and maximize or minimize the number of trucks that retain in our downtown core on surface routes. So the idea of looking at ways in which we can maximize usage of the tunnel, I think, is a good one. So thanks, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councillor Nussbaum. Conseiller Cloutier, s'il vous plaît.
Merci bien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
On the report that was discussed at Transportation Committee, page 5 of the report, about one-third down, says that the Ottawa River has 5 interprovincial bridges, and that we expect that it's expected that in spite of improvements to transit, a new span will be required by 2031. How will that factor, that assertion, be considered as part of this environmental assessment?
Mr. Mayor, it won't form part of this environmental assessment, so that's future look out.
Yeah. So the EA that is anticipated, will it be looking at? It will, of course, look at the routes that were looked at in the $750,000 report, but the options that will all be asked about as part of the fallout of the EA, be it the extension of the Vanier Parkway or other routes for a tunnel or whatever. How will that be considered?
If we can have Ms. Chee's microphone open, please. Here we go.
Yeah, you're there. Don't. Okay.
Oh, there we go. Mr. Mayor, the EA that is being envisioned here as the next steps is purely focused on the downtown traffic tunnel. The issue of other crossings, again, that would be a federal issue for them to address, because interprovincial crossings over rivers are a federal, under federal mandate. So that would be a separate discussion.
In the past, for example, the question of the Kettle Island crossing that was taken off the table in 2013, the federal government, both the Gouvernement du Québec and the provincial government were involved, the City of Ottawa, the City of Gatineau, the federal government, the NCC. What would be the way forward? Because the report does in fact say a new span will be required by 2031. Do you agree with that? Is that still correct? Is that still the position of... Just don't touch it. There you go.
There we go. That section of the report is referencing clauses in the official plan and transportation master plan, not specific to the feasibility study. It's just the background information.
So do we believe that the volume of truck traffic passing through Ottawa, do we believe that despite higher levels of transit ridership, one or more new river crossings will be warranted by that time, and it's referring to that time, 2031? Is that, to your knowledge, is that correct?
That is part of the work that we did in 2013 Transportation Master Plan. So this is an issue that would be also revisited when we do the next round of the Transportation Master Plan update, yes.
And the next round is due in 2019?
No, it will be. It would be 5 years in sync with the official plan. So that's the when the amendments are done or the appeals are done with the official plan, the clock starts. So we will be in step with the official plan. So that could be in 2020, 2021.
Okay. So what would be, when would we start on an EA or the work on that? Because I think it might impact the necessity, the desirability, the financing of this proposed tunnel.
Mr. Mayor, it's the EA of a new crossing. Is that the reference? That will have to be part of several steps we'd have to go through, confirm it, work with the federal government, the NCC, and the two provinces of ministries of transportation to pursue that if that is their priority.
Would it be something that the department would contemplate, that we would build to the objective being, and I recognize the issue, my colleagues, I recognize the issue of truck traffic in downtown Ottawa. Would it be desirable to look at building that span earlier rather than later, since it's necessary for 2031? Would it be desirable to look at that span earlier rather than later?
Mr. Mayor, the very good questions, although the challenges, all of those are speculative until you do the refresh of the Transportation Master Plan, and that's, as Vivi explained, kicks in once all the appeals are done, and the appeals are not done. You'd be crystal balling, making a bunch of assumptions, and you could end up tripping over yourself in terms of that. So, and it would not be staff's recommendation to start doing that speculation in terms of that. We would recommend you wait for your refresh of the TMP.
The current master plan to be refreshed in 2020 is 2 years old. And it does state that a new span will be needed by 2031, and by the time we get shovels in the ground on this EA will take years, and then financing. So I'd perhaps we could discuss it a little bit more and see what else is, how we could avoid, you use the term, Mr. Manconi, tripping over each other, tripping over a tunnel that we might not need, or a span that we might not need if we look at the whole situation now. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. What about the Alta Vista Parkway? Do we need that? Some others aren't, I think. Your neighbor. Councillor Eglai.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Chia, I just want to confirm that the motion that was just tabled this morning, we didn't have that in front of us at committee. Have you had a chance to consider it from a staff perspective, and can you work with it, or are there some tweaks you need to it? Just, I'm not saying I'm against the motion, just want to make sure it's something that staff are able to deliver on before we vote.
Mr. Mayor, yes, we can work with the motion.
Thank you for that clarification.
Right, and thank you, Councillor, for the work you did at committee. I know Councillor Deans had a hand in improving the report along with others, so I appreciate that. Councillor Monette, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Basically, the issue we're dealing with today is an issue that's been dealing with for decades. This is not only about the tunnel issue, it's about the bridge issue. And if you remember, there's been a lot of studies, environmental assessments done on different options for the bridges, going right back to the Greber report in the 1960s. As a council, we felt quite strongly that we needed to find a better option than the bridge, and that is why we had decided to look at the tunnel option. This is not something new. This is since 10 years being on council, we've been dealing with this file. And I believe that moving forward with an environmental assessment is the proper alternative. What we will see with an environmental assessment is the total actions that will be required to go forward with the tunnel option. If we do not go through a tunnel option, then we will be right back at the table discussing the bridge issue again. And there's been 4 studies on the bridge. Every time it's been Kettle Island. Personally, I do not wish to go back to that debate. I believe that the tunnel option is a way to go for the future. And, you know, basically we need to find a solution once and for all for the trucks on King Edward. King Edward trucks does not work. So we need to be proactive, as we have been proactive on many files on this council. So I will be supporting the motion, and I also do support Councillor Hubley's motion to study about keeping trucks completely off of King Edward, except for the tunnel, and except for delivery to local streets. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Merci. Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've had this truck, as this is said, problem for a long time, and even if we do this study, I've been told it'll take about 4 years, and if you decide to build it then and had the money, it's going to be 8 to 10 years before you could ever get a tunnel built and operational. So we still have the truck problem, Mr. Mayor, and I think one of the things by doing this, I don't think we should shelve the problem of what we already have, and I think there does need to be some actions taken, whether it is, like when I see a truck full of lumber coming and going through the downtown to cross the bridge, there's no reason why that truck couldn't be said, you can't go through here, they have to go further up the valley, which is where they're coming from in the first place. I think we should be taking a look at alternative ways of getting at least some of the truck traffic that is not designed for the urban area of Ottawa at all to cross at locations closer to where they're actually coming from, even though then they'll have to go on a road that isn't quite as nice as going through Ontario. That's their problem, not ours, and we do have to do something, because otherwise this problem is only going to get worse. The city is growing, so there are going to be more trucks and more things, and over the next 10 years, I don't think it's fair to have that problem staying there. So I don't know whether this could something. I'm just going to make it as a suggestion that be looked into in the future, Mr. Mayor. That way, I think we should do a study of alternatives that could reduce the existing truck traffic that's going through that area now, while we're doing this study and determining whether we can go ahead with it in the future, because that depends on funding. And I've been told this does not interfere with existing priorities such as the LRT program, which will be going, because the program is for it eventually to go to Canadian Tire Place. But there isn't unlimited amounts of money for all of these programs. And it's going to be difficult for future councils, I think, to, as well as now, to deal with all of this. What we've done so far, when we improved King Edward a little bit, it made it a little bit easier on King Edward, but getting to King Edward is not very great, and it's still a very dangerous situation on King Edward. And to live with that for the 8 to 10 years and to take no actions at all is not smart. There are some other bridges that could be used for some of the truck traffic. There are alternatives up the valley or down the valley, and I would like to see some of that work going on in the future. So just raising this as a point, because I don't want to say we solved the problem because we're looking into a tunnel. We haven't solved the problem. It's still there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor DeRose, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know I sit on the Transportation Committee, and we've done lots of conversation over this tunnel and the EA. And I just want to also echo my colleagues, Councillor Monette, and your leadership on this. At least let's move on and do something. And I understand the environmental study is going to cost us some money. I just want to go on record and on to making sure the assurance of this EA study, the money that we're going to spend on it, it's not going to delay any project, and it's going to be an issue to any other commitment the city has done within master transportation plan to making sure that we have enough money and not stuff delayed. As we know, already we have delay on MTP, and I just want to make sure that there is an assurance that this money is going to be not reflecting or delaying any project. And that will be
I think Mr. Manconi can answer. He's answered it before.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can assure you, and I've issued a memo to that effect, that the direction given by the city manager to us is that we're going to bring forward our portion of the funding so that we do not erode the EA study list that's already in the queue.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor DeRoche. Councillor Kakish, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I did not support this item at Transportation Committee, and I don't intend to do so today. I think Councillor Cloutier hit the nail on the head by raising some of the points that he did in terms of the real issue and the real solution. And I think what we're doing today by supporting this is having a solution of political convenience as opposed to a more sensible and smart solution in terms of financial accountability, but also in terms of the engineering perspective as well, and dealing with the future forecasting of the interprovincial capacity and numbers that we need. So there's risk anytime we do dig in, and Sandy Hill is called Sandy Hill for a reason, and there's risks with moving forward with a complicated plan, and for half the cost we can get an interprovincial bridge that will deal with the traffic problem, with the truck problem downtown, and would deal with the future forecasting and capacity issues that we have on the existing bridges, but we'll also have the benefit of pathway cycling and pedestrian connectivity as well. So for half that cost, we can do something that's more sensible, that's more feasible from an engineering perspective, rather than do what is politically convenient. And there's an opportunity to do that with new representatives at the provincial and federal levels in Vanier. So, I'd like to usually be a team player, but I just can't support this. It's just not the sensible and right thing to do, so I'll be dissenting on this item.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brockington, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning to everyone. Can I just be reminded what the stale date is of an environmental assessment once it's been approved by the ministry? How many years do you have to commence your project before an EA is required again?
Mr. Mayor, these types of EAs have a shelf life of 10 years, but it does not mean that in the 10th year you have to, or the 11th year, you have to redo the EA. We would do a review to make sure that the assumptions and any other policy changes are still valid as part of the original EA.
So for the bridge project that you're saying may need to be done by 2031, if that 10-year timeline has expired and no work had yet been started by the city, you would have to do that refresher exercise. Is that correct?
For any EA, yes.
Okay. So if the city fails to secure funding for the EA from the other levels of government, is this EA then dead?
Well, let me just comment on that, because obviously it's predicated on a third, and if one of the partners or both of the partners don't come forward, we don't have the money to do it. So it's either finding the money somewhere else and doing it 100%, which I fundamentally disagree with. I think this is such a big project, and I'll speak to it in my closing comments, that we need all three partners at the table.
Okay. So a question that Councillor Cloutier asked concerns me a bit, because it was always my understanding that an environmental assessment also weighed other options, that through the environmental process you basically have to prove that what is being proposed is the best option. And the environmental assessment just doesn't just look at the environmental impact, but that other potentially viable options are going to be considered. And through that A, you bleed or you hammer out all those options. But I heard today that's not the case. So could you just clarify that, please?
Mr. Mayor, The EA, through the EA Act, we define the scope of it, and then you look at the options based on the problem that's identified. So in this case, it's the problem of truck traffic and the potential to put it into a tunnel. So that would be the scope of the EA. So we would look at, well, a corridor has been identified from this feasibility study, so the work that was done in this feasibility will feed into the next stage of the EA. Whereas for the bridge study, that was defined, the problem was a new interprovincial crossings, and that was defined by the province and the federal governments. So they looked at options across the city, crossing the Ottawa River. There were 10 corridors that were examined. So we can scope our EA to address an issue. And that's, for this particular EA, it's about the tunnel through the downtown.
But if I take a step back, I think we all acknowledge there's a problem with heavy trucks in the downtown core. Maybe we all don't agree whether or not we need to proceed with a tunnel. But as a member of council, and I raise this at committee, I need a better understanding of what all the viable options are. I asked for information. I received a report back from you that looked at the EAs for the bridges. But I don't know what else has been looked at as far as time restrictions or an elevated roadway or an elevated highway rather than a tunnel. And so my concern is this EA will proceed. You'll come back with much more details about how we do it, the feasibility of a truck tunnel. But when does this council weigh all the other potential options? Because the previous speaker said the bridge option can alleviate that program. It can facilitate hazardous materials that I hear a tunnel will not facilitate. And yet all these other options still exist. So if this EA that we're debating now is not going to consider the other options, when do we consider the other options?
So, Mr. Mayor, I think I have to ask the question, are we talking bridge crossing or are we talking the tunnel? The report before you deals with the truck tunnel, and it listed all the options that Ms. Chi and the experts walked through, and we're happy to follow up in terms of sub-assumptions within those assumptions. But this is my response earlier on, is I think we're mixing a river crossing with a truck tunnel. So if we want to talk bridge crossings, that's not what this report is about. This is about the mandate that we're given in terms of look at the truck tunnel feasibility, and we followed all the rules of the environmental assessment. And we can certainly debrief you on all the details that, even further than what's in the report. But I can assure you that the environmental assessment process, or the study process, was followed through as required by Ms. Chi and the professionals that we hired.
I understand that the scope of the EA that we're debating right now talks about a tunnel to alleviate the truck traffic. But what I'm saying is, if you take one step back, if you put yourself in my shoes, and from what I've heard from my constituents, the concern is they want to get handcuffed that when this EA is finished, council will have, in their opinion, a viable option, that the only solution possible will be to use that truck tunnel. Being a fairly new member of council, what I'm saying is I'm not aware of the pros and cons or the cost benefit of all the options that exist. And so before I put my support today in doing an EA for an underground truck tunnel, I'm not convinced that we've bled out other possibilities. And so that's why I can't support moving forward with an EA today on the truck tunnel, because there could very well be other options, and I believe the bridge is another viable option. But that doesn't mean I'm convinced that the bridge is, because I think there are other possibilities that still need to be discussed. So that's the dilemma that I'm having. So, if the EA goes forward, I'll support that as a member of council and study those results when they come out. But I still believe when that's done, council will still have an obligation to weigh other options before they make a final decision on what to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shirelli, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The whole question of a tunnel for downtown for trucks has been sort of an issue on and off the discussion agenda for the past 15 or 20 years. A tunnel like this would be something that would be nice to have. It would be a worthwhile project, but we can't afford $2 billion. So $2 billion is about $6,500 per household in the city. So even people who want this, do they want it that much? And I think the answer there is no, especially since the problem you're trying to solve is interprovincial truck traffic that doesn't necessarily fall squarely to the benefit of the city. Now, in discussing this with the mayor indicated that there is a possibility of getting the upper levels of government to fund a much greater share, maybe even up to 100% of the cost of the bridge, of the tunnel. Well, if that is the case, if there is some chance of that, despite the fact that I wouldn't support the tunnel at this point, I will support this phase of the inquiry and the EA, because it does make sense to invest that much money into it if there is a potential for the upper levels of government living up to their responsibility in this area to a significantly higher amount than a third. So although I'm certainly not guaranteeing that I would support the tunnel when it comes time to look at that, I will support this level of it because I think it makes sense.
All right, thank you, Councillor Shirelli. Councillor Deans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just following on what Councillor Shirelli said, this is also my understanding. I mean, I think what we're asking the mayor to do through this resolution is go and speak to the upper tier levels about funding an environmental assessment. And we're prepared to contribute to the environmental assessment because it's in our interest, even though we're making the presumption up front that this is an interprovincial issue and it would be wholly funded by upper tier governments because of its interprovincial nature of it, and that it would not be local dollars to spend the $2 billion to resolve this issue. And we heard the mayor say at committee last week that he sees the capital money coming from upper tier levels of government. So that leads me to this whole question of the toll motion that's here today. We heard the mayor say at the committee last week that the tolls would go for the maintenance and operation, general maintenance of this tunnel, but if it's an upper tier road, why would we be maintaining it anyway? So I'm just trying to follow the dots on this. If we're not going to build the tunnel, we're presuming the feds are, the upper tier governments, to deal with an interprovincial issue, and if they build it, aren't they going to maintain it? Like, why would we take it on as a city maintenance contract? So before I vote on the toll, and I'm happy to study tolls because I think it will lead to the conclusion we heard from the committee, from the staff last week, which was probably doesn't make any sense anyway. But why would we at this point be, building in a presumption that we would take ownership of it and have to maintain it?
Mr. Mayor, that's a good question. There's two streams to that. There's the what are you building, and then the how on the execution, both design, build, maintain, operate. What we're going to do is bring you the information so you go into that eyes wide open, and I'm confident that there will be different options and scenarios that you're going to want to consider in all that, including the toll aspect of it.
But why would we as a city be looking at that? Why would we right out of the gate say, we want to, are we agreeing with what the mayor said at committee, which was the tolls would be simply for the maintenance of it, or would you see the tolls as being consideration of the construction of it?
I believe the motion directs us to look at the impacts of tolls, and that's what we want to bring to you. We'd bring you that information so, again, you can be informed and make the right decision. There are various scenarios you could consider under that. What the mayor acknowledged and said could be a good option, a viable option to pursue, and we'll bring all the scenarios forward for you.
So you're at this point not making any presumption if we were to toll that road, if it would go for capital costs or operating costs?
You have to go into it with all options out there, and there's no hard decision that's been made. That is one of the scenarios that we will certainly look at.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Blais, please.
Thanks very much. Can someone remind me where did we end up on the interprovincial bridge crossing? Like, at what stage was the study when the plug was pulled?
Mr. Mayor, it was in the EA phase. They reached to the point where they developed a corridor. They defined the corridor, and they were working on the functional plan of that corridor. And where it stopped was that that went out for public consultation, and the next step would have been to take the issues and mitigate those issues through the next step of the design.
Perfect. And if I recall correctly, the corridor was Kettle Island, and then the highway access was at the Vanier Parkway, effectively. Is that correct?
No, it was not at the Vanier Parkway. It would come through at Kettle Island, follow the Aviation Parkway corridor, and come through near
at the baseball stadium.
The transit station. What? Surville. Near Surville, right?
Sure.
Yeah, near Surville.
Near Searville. Okay, so at the split, basically. Okay. So my next question is about the TMP. Why is it speculative to believe that a statement in the TMP 2 years ago that an interprovincial bridge crossing...
Councillor, can you put your mic a little closer? It's hard to hear.
The TMP, which is 2.5 years old, says that an interprovincial crossing is required by 2031, and so I'm wondering why it's speculative at this point to still believe that.
The TMP looked at the transportation network across the city based on demand and forecasted demand and based on information from the Origin Destination Survey. So it pointed out that to the end of this planning horizon, to 2031, there would be a need for another crossing. And basically that is just to give an indication of where we're headed. This would all have to be reviewed each time we do a refresh of the master plan.
I get that. I guess the point was Councillor Cloutier asked if the position of the department is that we still need a crossing by 2031, and the answer was that's speculative. And so I'm wondering if everything in the TMP is now speculative. It's only 2 years old, right? It was based on assumptions when we passed it. The only things that have changed are the things that we've built so far, which is not quite much, given that we're only 2 years into it. So I'm just wondering, is every project that's forecasted as needed now speculative?
No, it's based on analysis, and it was over a 20-year time frame, so things are further out. Will need to be reviewed to see if that's still a consistent assumption. And this master plan is also an active, dynamic document. So we're taking in all sorts of input. The growth is a consideration. Where development's taking place is another consideration. So all this come into play. So I would not agree that it's all speculative in our transportation master plan.
So just the need for an interprovincial crossing is speculative? I guess I'm trying to understand if what we said 2 years ago is still true or not, right? If 2 years ago we said we should be planning for, thinking of the need for an interprovincial crossing by 2031, which I agree is still quite a long way away, why is it now, only 2 years later, now speculative that we'll still need that?
So everything that staff put in that report was the best information they had at the time, and it's a forward-looking document. I responded to that question from Councillor Cloutier, and there are a lot of variables in this bridge discussion, as you've heard over the many years. And for staff to sit here and say that that is 100% bankable, that you will need that, I cannot give you that assurance. So no, not everything in the TMP is speculative, and no, not everything in the TMP is up, but a lot of things happen over a decade or 15 years. And with respect to the bridge crossings, there's been a lot of dialogues, as you know, and for staff to sit here and say that that is an absolute right now with what we know, I cannot give you that guarantee.
What's the feasibility study for that? Yeah, I guess I don't want to guarantee it. Just it makes me question then a project in our TMP that we say is needed for 2028, if that is now speculative because it's still so far away, even though it's in the affordable framework. Like, I guess it calls into question all of our longer term projects.
Actually, it depends, because some are so obvious they're right in front of you and the data supports that decision. And some of them are, again, that point in time, what you had and what you shaped that plan for. So I think you would agree, Councillor, there's a bunch of projects in there that you don't need any further analysis, that they're there, they're needed, and it depends on, as Ms. Chi talked about, the data that feeds all those projects.
Okay, I guess I appreciate the answer. I just think that the data saying that we need an interprovincial crossing has been the same data for almost 40 years now. So I think that's one of those no-brainers as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Blair. Councillor Harder.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. My question is a little bit post the start of this. So the mayor, if we're successful as a city in getting the partnership, the 2/3 of the funding for the EA, and that will come back, I believe, to Council or to Transportation Committee. At that point, would it be worthwhile to establish a sponsor group? And I'm saying that as someone who has seen the evidence of success that comes from sponsor groups since we started using those, and that would have been in the previous term of council, I believe, or the one before that. So I'm wondering if at that time there would be value in having a sponsor group that would be comprised of the chairs of planning, transportation, and transit, along with the 3 local councillors. So the Councillor Nussbaum, Fleury, and McKenney.
Staff would be fine with that. I would default to the councillors that you just referenced.
Sure. I think it would be, we have the evidence to show how effective that really is. It saves a lot of time and money on both sides. We've got people that are inside the tent that actually are leading different departments, the staff, the councillors, the local folks, and it makes you better able to maneuver faster and when necessary. So I was thinking about moving such a motion today, but I really think it is premature. We need to see whether we get the funding first. As the mayor said when Councillor Brockington was asking, are we going to go forward with this if we don't get the partnership? And the mayor was very clear in saying we don't have the money to do that, and that would not be where he would go. So I am comfortable that once we do have the funding, that we will have that process, which has been proven very, very successful in all of our major policy pieces since actually the Transportation Master Plan, I think, is where it started, and the official plan, and the development charges. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harder. And the last speaker is Conseiller Fleury.
Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the members of Council who today are taking the opportunity to talk about this file and propose new ideas, and that want to commit to a solution.
Really was great in terms of bringing issues to the table, bringing the different perspectives, but also recognizing how important and how much of an issue this is citywide. And I think, a lot of us have done the legwork to bring it as a term of council priority, and that was really to bring it to where we are today. Some are speaking of, what other options are on the table. I would share this, is that there's an overall frustration on behalf of the community and business community, on behalf of the resident, but also of the business community, that there's been 40 years of study for that corridor. There's been 14 bridges and 14 crossings that have been looked at. Those reports are available, but we could not get 5 levels of government to agree. We could not get 5 levels of government to agree, and that was why there was no proceeding on the bridge portion at Kettle Island. The province removed their support, and so did our support follow. So now we work closely. At the time we had 5 levels of government. Now we have 2. This is an Ottawa issue. It's an Ottawa solution too. We're working closely with the province on the feasibility study. I want to thank Vivian, her team, on the report. I think it's really well thought through. The analysis was complete, and now we're in a position where the province isn't surprised by the findings. They're well aware of it. It brings us to the next step, which is the environmental assessment.
Évidemment, au comité, on a amené une motion.
In committee, obviously, we had the three components.
Motion really addressed the overall theme for the next steps, which the first point, I'd like to summarize them by saying that the entrances of the tunnel off the McDonald-Cartier Bridge be looked at. Same thing with the Overbrook connection to minimize the impacts on community. The second point was really looking at the existing truck routes through downtown and what an infrastructure like that could mean in terms of further restrictions overall. And the third point was the March 28, 2011 report, specifically looking at the future of King Edward once that infrastructure is built. And again, I'm supportive of today's motion from Councillor Hubley. I would just speak of two elements of that, though. The toll portion is really much further than what we're asked to look at today. I personally believe that that infrastructure should be a provincial one. I believe that it is a provincial mandate to connect the 400 highways to an interprovincial crossing. I do see, though, that we need to take the lead in the EA and get the support of the three levels of government to get it going and really to advance or to not advance but to really look at the feasibility portion beyond the feasibility portion of this. Alors évidemment, c'est une infrastructure hyper.
This is a very important issue for our city. It's a chronic issue. I'd like to thank all the members of the community, the business community, and our colleagues have looked at this.
Many members are saying, or some members are saying, oh, we should look at other alternatives and blah, blah, blah. Look, the 14 crossings have been looked at for years. Those reports are available. I've only been on the file 6 years. I've only been elected 6 years, and I can show you the layers of documents that I've been privy to on the matter. Quite happy that the feasibility of the tunnel is in front of us today and really looking forward to the next steps. And for those of you who are unsure about this tunnel as an option, I invite you, come with me. We'll stand at the corner of King Edward and Rideau any time of the day, any time of the night, any weekday, any weekend, and you'll see the issue that it has on our city. Alors, je vous remercie les membres du Conseil.
So thank you to all members of council for your support today. I think that'll give us the necessary ammunition to see our provincial counterparts. And then we can see what the various components that are necessary, the funding, and also toxic material or dangerous material transported by trucks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Merci, Conseil. I'd like to offer some comments on this particular proposal that's before us. First of all, thank you, Councillor Hubley and Moffat, for the thoughtful suggestion with respect to your motion. We asked staff last term at Council to explore the feasibility of a truck tunnel between the McDonald-Cartier Bridge and the 417. That's the mandate that we gave staff, and I thank Vivi and her team and Mr. Manconi and his team. That's what they set out to do. Nous avons demandé au personnel d'étudier la...
We asked staff to look at the feasibility of a link between McDonald-Cartier Bridge and Highway 417, and this is exactly what they did. And thank you so much. For Mr. Manconi and Mrs. Chi.
There are a lot of urban myths about Sandy Hill. You couldn't put a tunnel there because it's all built on sand and so on, but I think this study has shown that it is feasible from a technical point of view. Today, we're being asked to take the next logical step, which is to undertake a detailed environmental assessment that would provide the City of Ottawa with a much clearer sense of how much such a tunnel would cost and the specific routing. There are some who are balking today at the price tag for a project that could be built many years down the road. Now, as we're in the final stages of negotiating Stage 2 of LRT, let's remember a couple of facts. 6 years ago, I would suggest to you, no one would have believed you if you had told them we're planning a $5 billion light rapid transit project for our community, including a 2.5-kilometer tunnel. Today, we're not talking about it, we're actually building it. Aujourd'hui, nous construisons ce système.
Today, we are building a light rail system, and residents will benefit from it in less than 2 years.
Will be up and running. We still have a way to go until final completion, but I do believe that our ability to get things done as a city is increasing. Between now and 2026, as an example, over $50 billion will be spent on transportation and transit infrastructure projects in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, including the replacement of the Gardiner Expressway. The most recent estimate to fix the crumbling Gardiner Expressway alone is over $1 billion. And during that same window of time, the Government of Canada will spend close to $5 billion to replace the Champlain Bridge in Montreal, and billions more to build a second crossing to get goods across the Windsor-Detroit trade corridor. So the next 10 to 15 years will see historic and transformative infrastructure investments in Ottawa, Ontario, and other parts of Canada as governments act on the need to invest for the long term and at the same time create jobs. I can assure you that if Yonge Street from Front to Bloor was a major truck route for interprovincial truck traffic, or a downtown street in Montreal or any other big city, that it would have been fixed by now. It's not far-fetched to believe that we will one day convince the governments of Canada and Ontario to help the City of Ottawa correct an historical planning mistake, one that has allowed an interprovincial truck route to run on local streets through our neighborhoods and in the heart of our nation's capital. And just think about that area for just a moment, because I think Councillor Fleury hit the nail on the head. Anyone who spent time down in that area realizes that King Edward as a truck route has divided that community of Lower Town and has had a very negative impact on the quality of life of not just the people who live in that area in Sandy Hill, but also residents and the literally millions of tourists that come down that area each and every year. And so while we have the private sector like Rideau Centre investing $340 million to improve their property, tens of millions of dollars of tax dollars from the city invested in revitalizing and renewing Rideau Street, 2 LRT stations in that area, the Ottawa Art Gallery expansion, the new Germain Hotel and condos, even the Shaw Centre. All of those are being impacted adversely as a result of having 18-wheelers, lumber trucks weaving in and out of the downtown core. I, for one, believe that we can correct this mistake of the past, because I asked those who are opposed to this EA request, and remember, this is just the EA request, what's your alternative? It's either a bridge or a tunnel. It's not a gondola, it's not attaching wings on trucks, it's a bridge or a tunnel. And we've said no time and time again to the bridge, Kettle Island, farther east in Beacon Hill, Searville, or in Orleans. And it's clear that the City of Ottawa, the Province of Ontario, and the people of Ottawa generally have rejected that idea. Je crois que nous pouvons ensemble corriger.
I think that together we can correct this error of the past.
Today is not about the long-term investment of paying for the tunnel. Today, I'm seeking your support to allow me, as head of council, to seek funding from the Province of Ontario and from the Government of Canada to equally share in the cost of the environmental assessment, because I truly believe that they do have a stake in this. As I believe Councillor Fleury said, there's a provincial obligation to connect interprovincial routes to the 400 series highways, and obviously because of the vast majority, all of these trucks are coming from a different province, there's a federal responsibility as well. And I look at projects like the Champlain Bridge. There's no interprovincial connectivity there, but the federal government's at the table supporting that project. And this EA will give us the data we need sometime in 2019 or 20 to decide whether or not we want to continue exploring this option. So some have said, well, why are we wasting this money on this process? Well, because you have to walk before you can run. We have to do the EA in order to find out what the true cost is. The $2 billion cost includes, as I understand, a significant contingency of over 40%. So we want to get a more precise figure so we know what the cost is, and then our council, or in essence future councils, will decide whether that's the right route to go. Why would council want to take this option off the table at this time, at a time when governments are set to break records in infrastructure funding? In the meantime, I want to reiterate that our next major infrastructure priority is to complete the Confederation line to Orleans and Trim Road, to Canada, and we just passed the EA request for the Canada process, and to Bowesville and Riverside South, including an airport link. I do not see any circumstances which the city would consider changing its sequencing of infrastructure priorities, and the general manager has reiterated that, as has the city manager, and I'm doing the same right now. But it doesn't mean we can't start looking at the next big infrastructure investments that will be needed in our city to ensure a greater quality of life for the men, women, and family that live in that particular neighborhood. In fact, I believe that we have an obligation as a council to do so. So I thank members for their constructive comments and input. We have a motion by Councillor Hubley, seconded by Councillor Moffat. On the motion, carried. On the report as amended, carried. Dissent. All right, yeas and nays have been called. On the full report as amended.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Yes.
Councillor El Shantiri?
Yes.
Councillor Moffat?
Yes.
Conseiller Cloutier?
Oui.
Conseiller Monette?
Oui.
Councillor Hubley?
Yes.
Councillor Chernyshenko?
Yes.
Councillor Darouz?
Yes.
Councillor Harder?
Yes.
Councillor Shirelli?
Yes.
Councillor McKenney?
Yes.
Councillor Eglai?
Yes.
Councillor Tierney? Councillor Kadri?
Yes.
Councillor Taylor?
Yes.
Councillor Leeper?
Yes.
Councillor Middick?
Affirmative.
Councillor Brockington?
No.
Councillor Kakish?
No.
Conseiller Blais?
Yes.
Councillor Deans?
Yes.
Conseiller Fleury?
Oui.
Councillor Nussbaum?
Yes.
Mayor Watson?
Yes.
21 yeas, 2 nays.
Thank you. So, Councillor Harder, did you wish to broach the subject of a sponsors group after confirmation securing of the funds?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I did when Deputy Mayor Manette was in the chair, and I think it was well received. Certainly, the local councillors are interested in that, and we've seen how successful sponsor groups have been since we've incorporated them. So I thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you for your initiative. Lifted from the bulk consent agenda is item number L on public transit infrastructure funding. I'd ask the Treasurer and General Manager of Corporate Services to provide us with an overview of how the city's response to the federal transit infrastructure program was developed, and then open it up to questions. Ms. Similuk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So most of you will remember that last March when the federal government announced their budget, they announced that they were going to be, they had identified $60 billion over 10 years nationally to be spent in priority areas including public transit, social infrastructure, and green infrastructure. Shortly after that, the budget was announced, we as staff got together to start thinking about what would we put forward as projects when the criteria for what was being considered would be announced. We knew there was going to be, for the public transit fund, we knew there was going to be 2 phases for it. And the first phase we had initially been told was over a 3-year period, and our allocation for it, we had come to the conclusion based on how they would divvy up the funds would be roughly $158 million. We basically refined that list and worked on it, but we never had any criteria. And on July 25th, we had a phone call from the province, who the money, as of course is typical with the federal government, has to go to the province and then to the municipalities. It doesn't go directly to us. The province contacted us to request that we put together or provide them with a list in basically a 3-day turnaround time. The reason for the list was the federal government wanted to sign the agreement with the province of Ontario, and they had requested that 50% of the funds that they were transferring to the province of Ontario have identified projects with it. So the province approached the City of Toronto, they approached Ottawa, and a couple of other municipalities who cumulatively made up 50% of the funding of the initial allocation. So using the criteria they established, and the criteria were a little bit different than we had imagined they would be. First of all, we knew it had to be transit, and we had thought there would be active transportation on there. And that was confirmed, but the active transportation has to be linked to transit. Can't be active transportation that has no linkages to either a transit station or a transit way. The second thing was that they wanted the works have to be completed by March 31st of 2018. So that really reduced the amount of projects that we had on the list. Because of the time frame. This was, in fact, is meant to be a bit of an incentive program to spur on the economy. And then the last thing was they wanted this to be incremental, which meant we weren't allowed to take works that we already had in progress and to substitute their dollars for our dollars. So the only exception to that was the Phase 2 light rail, which we had already identified in the 2016 budget as requiring federal funding. But everything else had to be incremental spending, and we have to attest for that, and they will audit for it over the life of this agreement. So we put together our list. Our list was made up of all of the plans and processes and projects that you have seen before through the Transportation Master Plan, the Transit Master Plan, the Cycling Pedestrian Master Plans, through the budget forecasts that were there before, plus things that we knew we were going to have to add in the 2017 budget as a result of Confederation Line. So we looked at all of those projects, applied the criteria, and that is the list that is in front of you today. Our allocation from the federal government is $155.9 million, and that's what this list represents. The Minister of Infrastructure, Minister Sohi, has signed off on this list. So if there are substitutions, we will have to go back and ask for those. They are now in the process of asking all the other 161 municipalities who are receiving money to submit their project lists. So I think if we go back at this point in time and ask for substitutions, our getting a contribution agreement with them will be delayed. We were hoping that we would be out of the gate first in terms of having a contribution agreement, as we've got a defined list already, but that is in Council's hands. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great. I just want to take a moment to thank staff, because I know how hard they worked on this, and I met with the minister yesterday, as a matter of fact, who was very complimentary about the types of projects that we have included in this list that have a direct connection to transit. So appreciate all of the extra work in the depths of the summer to get this list prepared. Councillor Deans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And let me just start by expressing how very beneficial I think it is to have upper-tier governments who are actually willing to participate in funding public infrastructure. And so my goal in lifting this item today is not to hold up the process or to any way impede it. Obviously, we're not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. We're very happy to have partners that are willing to fund that. But having said that, and I understand that there was a very tight turnaround, there is not a lot of information here that even informs me now what exactly we're doing and where these funds are coming from, where they're going, and how it affects our current budget. So I do have a lot of questions, both about the process and also about the content. So just starting with process, I know you said it was a 3-day turnaround, but did it ever occur to you that we all have email and that you could have at least sent a list and said, we have a tight turnaround, we've been given this money, we're compiling a list, is there anything you want us to look at? Yeah, it's summer, but we're all members of council. We all work all the time, even if we're off-site. So why wasn't there any kind of attempt to at least inform council of this happening?
Mr. Mayor, we were in discussions with the Mayor's office on this. The process that we actually ended up following was rather iterative. We supplied a list to the province. We thought this list initially was going to be just indicative of where we wanted to spend the money. That council would in fact have an opportunity to look at that list and review it and question it, and we would have the normal fulsome debate that we have on these types of issues. What happened is when we provided our first list to the province and said this is indicative, council's still going to review it, they came back to us and asked us to basically dot every I and cross every T. It moved from being an indicative list to being a definitive list. We were even out to the point where we had the original list we submitted. We were $100,000 over our allocation. They asked us to come back and bring it in within the allocation. They asked us to justify every project that it was linked to transit. So this reiterative process, I would not have wanted to send out the first list to you because the criteria I'm guessing I would have to say we misinterpreted what the provincial government wanted from us initially, but it became clear as the list kept on coming back to us with questions and queries about why we hadn't filled in all the geographic information, why was this project, how did it link to transit, could we demonstrate that this was all incremental. It moved very quickly within that time frame from being just indicative, and that's why we didn't talk to the rest of council at that time, because we thought it was indicative, and by the time we found out it wasn't, the deadline was already there. So the decision was made. We would bring it to FEDCO. Initially, we thought we would just go to council, but then we decided it was better to have this kind of fulsome debate, and we would have that at FEDCO if the public wanted to make any comments as well. And here we are.
Okay, but I mean, the problem with the process is going to FEDCO or coming to council, we're basically told you can't change it because you'll be at the bottom of the list if you do, so, you know, take it or leave it is the choice that this council has. And I understand that, but I do think from midterm governance perspective, we need to look at putting some rules around how council's informed, because the Board of Directors of the Corporation of the City of Ottawa is 24 people. It's not just one. And when it comes to us agreeing tacitly to spend $155.9 million of our money, we should at least have some more say than a rubber stamp. And that's, in terms of process, I have a real problem with that. But let's move on. I did send some questions to Mr. Moser. I appreciate getting the answers to those, but in some ways they're still not very informative. I was, for example, asking about the details of funding envelopes that are included in here, and one of them was about the multi-use pathway renewal program. It's $5 million in total, and I was just asking a simple question, will the Green Borough Pathway System in my ward be included in that? The answer was, we don't know yet, because we haven't finalized those lists. So my question is, will council, at least at that level, have the opportunity to input into the projects on those lists?
Mr. Mayor, certainly we have being given a list of that, as we say in the response I provided to Chair Deans, that we're still evolving that list. Most of it, I think, would be covered off in the budget that's coming forward. It's coming very quickly in terms of the budget process. So I think I know we'll be identifying those projects in there, but we can certainly put a call out to councillors if they would like to meet and discuss it. We're prepared to do that.
Okay, I very much think councillors would like to have some say in those line items. So if you could make that happen, that would be great. I also want to ask a question about the money identified for Phase 2. And part of it is the money for preliminary engineering work, $90 million. So I recall at FEDCO, we approved a sole-sourced contract for Phase 2 LRT in the amount of $60 million, sourced to the RTG group. So now there's $90 million for Phase 2 engineering, so How does that square? We approved 60. Why do we need 90? And where's that 60 million we already approved? Is this money backstopping the money we've already approved?
Mr. Mayor, the $60 million was an estimate for the preliminary engineering as well as some of the early activities associated with Stage 2. That is a part of the total budget. Back in the 2016 budget, Council approved $40 million toward all Stage 2 activities above and beyond preliminary engineering. And the estimated budget for 2017 was $47 million. Together, they total $90 million. So other things that this would include would early land acquisition, other studies and analysis related to our procurement options, which we expect to come before Council later this year to discuss, and other activities above and beyond simple PE.
Okay, and is that $90 million, so is that included in the $3 billion Phase 2 project? It is. Okay, so I don't understand that, because if that's part of the $90 million and the $3 billion funding, and we are moving ahead with Stage 2 on the presumption that it will be funded one-third, 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 so if we fund that $90 million on this project, which is 50-50, we're actually contributing a higher percentage than we would if we just rolled it into the $3 billion one-third, one-third, one-third. So why would we do that?
Mr. Mayor, that 50% funding contribution toward the $90 million on the part of the federal government is, yes, their contribution. We still expect the provincial government to make their one-third share of those total $90 million costs for the overall Stage 2 budget. To answer your earlier question, the $90 million is part of the overall $3 billion capital program to deliver Stage 2. So, in a sense, those eligible costs from the federal government, 50%, is actually slightly higher than what we would have otherwise expect for the rest of the program at a third. Is that clear?
No, that's not clear to me. Can you just try that one more time?
In short, it's better than what we were expecting for their portion of the $90 million. So the federal government will pay half of the $90 million, or up to a half in terms of eligible costs. We are still expecting the province, as they indicated last July in their funding announcement, to contribute one-third of eligible costs towards the overall Stage 2 program. That $90 million is part of that program.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, I understand now. So, in looking at all this, there are, I think, 10 projects I counted on this list that are part of Phase 1. Some of them are even projects that have already been completed. So are we actually putting money back into city coffers now as a result of this?
Mr. Mayor, none of these projects are completed. We have to actually prove incrementality to the federal government in order to get this funding. So none of this work can be completed. I think you might be referring to the Tunney's bus loop. You're thinking that's completed, and my understanding is that the project we've put forward is additional work there. It's not the interim work that's already been completed. So is this putting money back into our coffers? For those projects, for example, that Mr. Swale was just referring to, where we now have a larger federal contribution than we were anticipating, those do actually provide us with a little bit of relief. But we have added projects on here to be funded from the federal government. The example I would give you is we have added on here, I think it's 15 or 17 new buses. So those were not in your in the forecast. Those have been added on to basically use up the room and to allow us to live up to a commitment we had to fund buses in growth areas. So the savings that we've actually had from projects like Stage 2 of light rail are actually being used to fund our share of the new projects that were put on this list. So the end result is that we're recommending that you use debt financing for our share as an interim measure only. We will refinance that in the years that the budgets would actually be coming forward to you to be approved. And we anticipate that of the debt that we are asking to be authorized right now, we'll actually only have to issue $10 million of it. So everything else is being offset by savings in other projects.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Just wondering, in a memo I received from Steve Cripps, I was told that $4.5 million from the PTIF fund would be allocated back to our contingency fund. So I guess a couple questions. How does that support the criteria that were given to us by the province? And then in a memo from Mr. Moser I received this week, he said the number is actually 4.75. So what is the number, and how does it meet the criteria?
The number would be the 4.75 for the contingency. And what we had done is, because there's a number of works that have to be advanced in light rail in stage 1 that we didn't have. We would either use contingency for it or we would add it into the 2017 budget. These works, the contingency fund was actually being used almost as a bit of a loan. We would use the money from there temporarily to allow the works to advance. But with the announcement of this particular fund and the fact that it was going back to April 1st of 2016 for expenditures, and it was all linked to transit, those particular projects, we took the opportunity to have them as, instead of having them 100% funded by city dollars from contingency, to have them half funded by the federal government, and then the rest will either be contingency or it'll be identified in the 2017 budget.
I could go on, but I think my time's up.
Right. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKenney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question about the Prince of Wales Bridge, and when we removed it as our priority in favor of Clegg, which I fully supported, say that out because that's a fantastic link, but the Prince of Wales Bridge as a pedestrian and cycling link is still part of our Transportation Master Plan priorities. And I was surprised that, it didn't make it onto this list. It does link to transit. It's actually from the other side of the river. It links nicely to transit for what could be potentially thousands, getting thousands of cars from crossing Booth Street Bridge and other bridges into the downtown. I know that at the time, the cost had escalated to, I think it was approximately $10 million. And at the time, there wasn't much interest from the NCC and Gatineau, but those times have changed, certainly with respect to our new federal government. So I just wonder why Prince of Wales wasn't included in the list, given that it is still a priority in our TMP for pedestrian and cycling linkages.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The challenge with that would be timing. As the Treasurer pointed out, project timeline April 2018. So even if we wanted to do it, to do everything that would be required with that through studies and alignment of the approvals and so forth, we wouldn't make it.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Could I just ask then, do we have like an estimate of what the timing would look like? I think that, it is still a priority. If we could somehow, because for light rail, we've got pedestrian and cycling links east-west from the south, but we really have nothing from the north. And, our discussion around, truck tunnels and the traffic patterns in the downtown. That also includes, thousands of cars that come over that we've seen with other good cycling infrastructure that we can remove, in the summer months, certainly thousands of vehicle trips per day, and even in the winter, hundreds. So I just wonder what the timing would be so that we are prepared for, if we have another opportunity. I think that we really should be prepared to ask for funding for Prince of Wales Bridge.
Councillor, we don't have that here today. I'd be happy to follow up with Ms. Chi and myself to sit down with you and just think through that and see if we can put a time frame on that. There's lots of elements to it, as you've pointed out.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor McKenney. Councillor Leeper, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to quickly echo the comments made by both Councillors Deans and McKenney. Had there been some kind of an email going out with respect to Councillors' wish lists for new money, Prince of Wales certainly would have been one of the things at the top of my list. The discussion with respect to how we're going to get that built, I would love to know that there is going to be some kind of a shovel-ready plan so that when an opportunity arises like this again, that we're able to take advantage of it. I still don't quite understand how that $10 million, $10.5 million figure was arrived at for the Prince of Wales Bridge. It would be good to take a look at those studies. This morning, though, I did want to take a look at one line item that will help me understand maybe a bit better about the incrementality of the projects that are on this list. That's the transportation demand management, $30 million worth for Stage 1 detours. The detours, as many of us have noted who are cycling, walking, and taking the bus through that corridor, are working very well. There are multi-use paths that have been added onto the project. What more is to come? What is the incremental work to be done on multi-use, or sorry, on the TDM, particularly as listed in the document between Tunney's Pasture and Le Breton?
Councillor, so as you pointed out, the detours on Stage 1 are working very, very well. Knock on wood, that continues. We have 20 active detours in place. I can say that that's probably more than anybody could have imagined, even in all the great engineering work that was done in Stage 1. This is the best estimate that we were able to pull out in terms of not only what's left to do, but also what's required to sustain it. And the costs are major in terms of some of the adjustments that we did. We also accelerated some of the work, you'll recall, in terms of earlier closures and so forth. So staff have put forward an estimate for the Treasurer to again mitigate any future costs. So this is our portion, or the 50% portion of the costs of all the extra work that's been done on the detours to make sure that we didn't have some of the disastrous results that people were forecasting, like on Scott Street and so forth. So we had great estimates going into this, and we put the best teams together to hold those 20 detours together. So this is the estimate of what's been done and what will be needed to be sustained till 2018.
Would it be possible to get that outlook of what more work is yet to be done that is incremental to the work that has already been done? Because again, the document specifically references Tunney's Pasture to Le Breton detour as something where there is incremental work to be done. I would love to get some insight into what that is going to be. And I think there's I still don't quite understand how some of this work will be incremental. We know during the procurement phase that the various bidders, the proponents, were invited to tell the city how they would manage the TDM through the construction. I think it should have been included in the original contract. There's a really good lesson here for us in terms of Phase 2 to make sure that we have rich detour plans, that they have been well thought through, that we don't have to scramble after a contract has been signed to add safe connections for pedestrians, to add the safe connections for cyclists. I'm struggling to understand the incrementality of this particular line item. I want to make sure that in Phase 2 we don't go through that again, and that the contract for Phase 2 includes TDM that keeps people safe. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I could just comment on that. Actually, RTG and the design team did a phenomenal job in forecasting the detours. I think it'll be a model for other municipalities. But to make it very, very real for you, Councillor, you'll recall in giving your community the assurances that the Scott Street detours were going to work even better than what was planned. We stepped up and gave your community and you and our users things that were never contemplated, such as additional bus stops, additional service, and I think we can all agree that that was the best thing for the community. Nobody with even the best transit minds or best construction detour minds in North America could have forecasted some of those things that came from the community, which is the grassroots ideas that we want. So I'd be more than happy to walk you through all the ideas your community brought forward, people like Mr. Jeans and so forth, Mr. Deans, that brought forward, which brought some of that incrementality to which we would all agree is the right thing, because we wanted to keep things very operationally sound and sustainable, and for those communities that were receiving some disruption, we wanted to work with them. Happy to walk you through all that.
And I guess my point would be those discussions all took place post-contract signing. Moving into Phase 2, a discussion before we sign the contract would be well in order to ensure that those additional measures don't have to be incremental to what we're paying the contractor to do in the first place. So I think a good lesson for us there in Phase 2. Still struggling to understand the 20 projects. I would like to get some understanding of what still has to go, because obviously the shovels have been in the ground for a long time now on the Phase 1 detour, certainly through our neck of the woods in Hintonburg. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Shevchenko, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. A number of my colleagues are asking quite important questions, clarifying details about some of the items that are in this list, and that is important to do, and I know those answers have either been provided or will to us, but I quite simply wanted to speak out in support of the process that was followed that got us here. We did our hard work as a council last term and this term in defining our priorities. We put together our wish lists, so to speak. We have a recently refreshed cycling plan, pedestrian plan, transportation master plan, and Phase 1 and Phase 2 of light rail. So when the City of Ottawa was given an extraordinary opportunity to put together a list for funding on short notice and with very recently defined criterion, it's at that point that I expect our senior staff to do their work and take the lists that we've given them and put together that list that matches and fits those criteria, and that's exactly what I saw happening. So thank you. Thank you for doing that. I'm sure it was a very difficult job. I don't see this as an opportunity to go back to Council and ask if we want to change our wish lists. I don't see this as being about wish lists. This was about plans that we've put together. And although some items on those lists might have been reordered because the criterion of this infrastructure project said, no, we're not taking those and we are taking these, and we went looking at how we matched those, that's really the work that was done. So, newsflash, when I am on vacation in summer, you can't reach me. I don't have reception of any kind at my cottage. When I'm on a bike tour, I don't carry any kind of electronics. So, you know, some of us approach our vacations that way, and I'm glad to know that when important decisions need to be taken of this kind, that it can be done, and we don't have to call all of Council back. I didn't see this as a case where any sort of emergency Council meeting might have been necessary. So that's all I feel I need to say here. Thank you. I know there's a lot of work to be done in understanding precisely what these projects are, but I'm not troubled in any way by the process. I actually support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few comments. It's my understanding, and Mr. Manconi or Mr. Moser or whoever can jump in if I've got this wrong, but all the projects that went forward on that list are projects that we have already discussed at committee or council, that we've already approved in some way, whether through the TMP or other policies and plans at the city. So there's nothing new on this list. And I frankly, I want to thank staff, because you had an extremely short timeline, you had a dense amount of criteria, complicated grouping of criteria to deal with to determine which out of the many, many projects we've got in the queue in the city, what fit into the box, what didn't fit into the box, to make sure that we got the utmost we could out of the funding envelope available. So I want to thank you for the time that you put in. You know, we are city council, but we're not engineers, we're not traffic experts, we're not accountants, well, some of us are. And in some cases, we need to rely on our senior staff. We hire them for their expertise and their professionalism. And I think this is an example of how they have gone out and they've done the job that we pay them to do. There was no queue jumping. There was no cherry picking of projects. There was no this should be in my ward or that should be in that ward. What it was an exercise in city building. It was looking at what was on the plate, what was available for the funding, what operationally made the most sense. And then staff went ahead and made that happen. We tried to make that, or they tried to make that happen, $100,000 more than they were entitled to, and they were slapped down for that. But they made it happen so that the most money that was available to the city was received by the city, so we could go forward with those projects that as a council or as a committee we had already discussed, we had already looked at, and we'd already approved. So again, working on a very short timeline with a very complex set of criteria, two different funding partners, if you will, that they had to deal with. I think that they did an excellent job. I thank them for that. And again, I really see this as a citywide opportunity that they took full advantage of for the residents of Ottawa. And I think they've served us well over the summer in doing this. I thank them for that. And I look forward to these projects coming forward to fruition.
Well said. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think it's a good meeting today, and it's a historical because Councillor Shevchenko and I were going to agree on something very much so. One of the items, and that's a question to our staff, and I don't think there's a weekend we don't get the police involved or city involved with the cyclists in the rural area. And I see here rural cycling routes, mislocation. So we're talking about $2 million investment. But can you just tell me what's that mean? Are we going to pave some shoulder, God forbid, to make it safe for the cyclist and the driver? Because our road become really very busy with cyclists, and we don't have the infrastructure to support that. Can you give a mic to? Okay.
Yes, that rural pathways one is for paving shoulders in the rural area, and but the projects would need also to connect somehow to transit. So we have a candidate project for that, and it's the old Montreal Road that would connect to Trim Road. So that's the account for that, or the project for that.
Okay, well, I believe that's great news, and thank you very much. But we can't be seeing this soon enough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor, you?
I'm done. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
So your mic was still on. Okay, thank you. Councillor Nussbaum, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And like others, very happy to receive a gift of $155.9 million. It doesn't happen every day. So useful to understand a little bit about how this is going to affect the corporation's finances moving ahead. And so my first question, which I think the Treasurer answered in part, was given that the parameters of the agreement were payment up to 50% for each of these projects. I think the Treasurer said that the idea would be, since these were not incremental, meaning we weren't anticipating spending this money, that we're going to take on additional debt in order to pay up to the 50% share that we're going to have to provide if the province is not kicking in. So is that correct, that the idea would be between now and March 1st, 2018, whenever we need to pay the 50% on these projects, that will take additional debt up to the $155 million?
Mr. Mayor, actually, that's not what I said. What I said was we're putting debt on these projects right now to allow them to advance, because your bylaws basically say you have to have the full funding authority in place before you can start capital works. What we will be doing, though, is between now and basically 2019, we will be refinancing that debt with the projects when the work was supposed to happen. For example, I'll take cycling path renewal. In the next 4 years, you were going to spend $8 million. The federal government has now given you an additional $1.5 million. So in the next 4 years, you're actually going to spend $9.5 million. But some of that work would have been done in 2018 or 2019 is now being advanced. In those years, you will not be doing more work. You will, in fact, be doing, we will be taking the money that you would have approved for those works in 2018 and 19 and using it to substitute for the debt. So we will, in fact, be eliminating all but $10 million of the debt that we are requesting to be authorized through this report.
Okay, thank you for that. Just so that I understand, you mentioned the acquisition of 17 new buses for LC Transpo, the $6.8 million, which wasn't in the long-term forecast. So where, just so that I'm clear, where is that 6.8, the 50% of that, where is that coming from?
We will include that particular project in the 2017 budget, and we will show the sources of financing for it at that time. Part of it will be development charges, because these are growth buses. We did not put any development charges on it at this point in time, but we will in the budget. The other portion, the cash portion of it, will come from other transit projects where we now have federal funding on which we hadn't anticipated, which frees up some of our money to use towards those buses. So it's coming from other projects and from development charges.
Okay, thank you. I want to come back to something Councillor Leeper asked, which was the TDM measures during Phase 1 of LRT construction, and just trying to square the answers that he got to that question with the idea that these are not to be incremental funds. And so I guess the question is, with the $15 million that the feds gave us for bus detours during LRT construction, had it not been for that contribution, what would the difference on the ground have been?
So, I'm looking at the treasurer because I'm not sure I understand your question, Councillor.
So the federal government gave us $15 million for bus detours during Phase 1 of LRT construction.
The original transition budget, which funded the detours, there was no federal funding on that at all.
Right, but now that
we're asking, yes, we put forward $30 million, and we're asking them to fund half of it. And if they didn't fund half of it, the city would fund all of it.
But you had said early on that this was not to be incremental. So clearly there had to be new plans to do something which we didn't envision doing initially.
This is to be incremental spending. So we will be spending $30 million more on those detours than we had originally planned to do. So this is incremental spending. So all of these projects have to be incremental spending, and this one would have been. We would be adding this to the 2017 budget and asking you to approve $30 million more for the detours. Now we're going to be coming forward and asking you to approve $30 million, half of it which will be funded from the federal government.
So why is it that it wasn't on the long-range forecast? I'm just trying to understand. Wouldn't that have been anticipated in the Phase 1 funding that we would need an additional $30 million to do the bus detours?
It was identified just within the last year and a half. Once we started with the detours, and Mr. Manconi was able to see what it's actually costing us, and we made changes to it. So your original budget that you approved for it, we had determined was insufficient. So that is why we would be going back in 2017 and asking for more money for it. This opportunity came up to have the federal government fund half of it, which eases the burden on us. But we would, if the federal government had not come forward with this particular program, there would be a line item in the 2017 budget asking for $30 million more for the detours.
to be spent in 14 months between January 1st, 2017 and March 1st, 2018. We were going to spend an additional $30 million for bus detours.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So just in terms of some of the other questions, and again, just try to understand the relationship between the long-term plan, the long-term forecast, and the additional money. Let's take something like bus stops and shelters. We got just over $500,000 for it. We had planned in 2017 to spend $670,000. So are the feds going to let us just essentially use the $670,000 which we had planned to spend on bus shelters as our contribution to the $550,000?
Actually, if you look further, you'll see we were planning on spending in 18 and 19.
Yeah.
So the works that are being advanced as a result of this most likely would have been in 18 or 19. So we will use the money in those years. 17 will most likely stand on its own and not be adjusted. So we will be doing the additional work as a result of this program, plus the 17, and it will most likely be the 18 or 19 budgets that are adjusted to allow us to refinance the debt.
Okay, so essentially the benefit really for us is going to be seen more in the 18 and 19 capital budgets when we'll see a withdrawal of some of the expected liabilities, and that hopefully will free up all sorts of money, particularly in the OC Transpo budget, where we were expecting to spend a certain amount of money. That money will be advanced. Half of it, I understand, is going to have to be paid for by debt. But is it fair to say that we will realize some benefit, particularly in the capital budget, in the 18-19 timeframe?
The result of this is that you're actually spending $10 million more of your own money than you had planned to. So that is the result of this particular program. So the new projects that were being added on there, the savings from the ones that were replacing federal dollars, our dollars with federal dollars, is freeing up some funds, but the net result is that we are going to actually be increasing the city's debt by $10 million, which is $10 million more in spending that you had originally planned to do, plus the federal share.
So when we look at something like the acquisition of 2 train sets for $20 million, again, was this something that had not been forecast, or was this something that was forecast in future years?
The 2 train sets were actually part of the $3 billion for Stage 2. So they would have been forecast in the long-range financial plan as being 1/3 funded by each level of government. We are now have 50% on from the federal government. We have assumed the provincial government will come forward with their 1/3 share, which reduces the city requirement, which is the money we would be using then to fund either the new buses or the detours or all the other projects that were being added on that weren't part of the original forecast.
I see. So when we do the overall financing for Stage 2, on top of the commitments that have already been made, we have to add this to the total cost of the project.
The 2 trains were actually part of the original cost, so they're not. This is not a new expenditure item. They were already identified. They're part of the $3 billion. So we're just able to, because of this program, to advance the purchase and to have them funded 50% by the federal government as opposed to 1/3.
But if they were already funded, if they were already envisioned, when the federal government gave the 1/3 commitment for Stage 2, you take a third of 40 million, 13 or whatever that is. Wouldn't there have been 13 budgeted from the feds already for these train sets?
The budgets, the federal government actually hasn't budgeted anything for this yet. We're still waiting for a commitment on them. They're working on Phase 2 of this. Phase 2 is where we're going to get the rest of the funding for Stage 2 light rail. So we anticipate that when they have their next budget announcement, they will provide more details on Stage 2, and that's where we'll get the rest of the funding for the next stage of light rail.
Okay, thank you. And my last question relates to some of the money, not so much transit, but more active transportation. There's money for Rita River crossings, both at Confederation Heights and at Bank and Riverside. $775,000 and $1 million. I presume those are for design studies or something to the like. Is that correct? And since that wasn't envisioned, I think, in the affordable part of the TMP, is that, again, another example of where we'll take on debt to pay our share of those in the hope that, well, I guess although it wasn't, I'm just trying to understand where is, again, the 50% contribution from the city going to come from the design work for those two bridges? I think they're a wonderful idea, I should add, but I'm just curious how the financing is going to work for them.
Again, Mr. Mayor, I'll say we're putting debt on for our share at this point in time. We will bring it forward in the budget, and if there's development charges that we can use, we'll use those. But otherwise, we'll be looking to refinance the debt on those particular projects with savings that we've generated in other areas.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you. Councillor Chiarelli.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. Just following up on Councillor Nussbaum's issue, if they weren't in the TNP, why were they on the list?
I'm sorry, you'll have to explain which projects you're referring to, Mr.
The Rideau River Crossing.
Sorry, Councillor, I didn't hear. What was the question?
If, as they said earlier, they weren't in the TMP, then how did they end up on the list?
Which one, the bridge over the Rideau Canal?
Rideau River Crossing.
Mr. Mayor,
okay.
I believe the project was the Rideau River Crossing, a bridge near Carleton University.
Right.
That is actually, it is in the TMP. Okay. There are no projects that are
well,
not.
Then that makes more sense. Okay.
Yeah.
So my next question is, was every city given the same deadline, or did each city have a different deadline for submitting their lists?
I'm not aware. We only know when they approached us. They didn't ask every city. They asked only a handful, from my understanding, because they needed to get that 50% of funding, projects identified for 50% before the feds would agree to signing off the agreement with the province. So I'm not aware of the timelines that they gave other cities.
Well, so what actually was the amount of time given to us?
The actual date, when they contacted us, was the 25th of July, and they actually had wanted something that same day. We said that was impossible, and so we asked, that was a Friday, so we asked could we have until at least Tuesday, and they agreed, and then so we submitted our list on Tuesday, and then we got it back that evening and back to the drawing board, and so it bounced back and forth for a number of days, and then I think the final date was August 8th when the final list was agreed to, and then I believe they had their press announcement or their announcement shortly thereafter.
Okay, so what were the 3 days that we were talking about earlier?
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the 25th, 26th, and 27th, because they had wanted it on the Monday. They had, and we had asked, could we have one more day?
Okay. All right, and you're not sure of how many other cities were asked?
No, I'm not.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Your Worship. I, too, will be supporting the recommendation before us. I significantly appreciate the focus and commitment by the federal government, including the transit infrastructure, and I do think this is a golden opportunity for municipalities and Ottawa to grasp and really push ahead with various transit projects. I appreciate the further information and clarification from the Treasurer earlier at this presentation and through the Q&A, because I think there was a lot of misunderstandings over the last few weeks, and maybe a technical briefing or some sort of info session with members of council when this first came out could have alleviated some of that and steered the messaging in the media a bit better. Did I understand correctly that direction was given to the city clerk to review future opportunities where we can engage council so that these types of concerns won't happen again, where we don't necessarily open the list up for, multiple amendments, but again, get city council on board as a heads up? Can that be added to our mid-year governance review as an item?
Mr. Mayor, I haven't been given that direction, and I would be pleased to follow up on it, but I do have some initial concerns that I could share with council right now, if that was appropriate.
Well, I'd like to deal with that when we get to mid-year governance. It doesn't have to go into...
I'd like to hear the clerk's answer.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there was some debate earlier in consideration with regards to councillors being apprised of these matters and considering them over email, and I would caution members of council. The Ombudsman is the meetings investigator for about 220 or so municipalities in Ontario, and he routinely posts his decisions on closed meetings violations. He recently posted one last week with regards to one of the townships south of us where members of council had engaged in a series of email exchanges with regards to a zoning application, and he found that was in breach of the Municipal Act closed meetings investigation because you were required to have those type of meetings in open. So as one of the members mentioned earlier, your option is, yes, Mr. Mayor, always you could call a special council meeting or a committee meeting in the middle of summer. My concern there from the clerk's perspective is in the past when those types of special meetings are called, even when they're not in the summer, members of the public are concerned that we don't give adequate notice and they're off on vacation. So it's a real challenge, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Sorry, would technical briefings like we get with major OC Transpo projects, budget matters, other infrastructure projects which routinely happen here for a subset of council, is that not possible?
Mr. Mayor, most of our technical briefings invite all members of council, as we did most recently with the taxi review report, and we actually invite the media and invite members of the public to attend. So we don't think they're meetings under the legislation, but in any event, we are being very open and transparent.
Thank you. I think at the end of the day, this is about accountability, and I think when you need to marry opinions that you've heard here from some members of council, appreciated the process, that direction's already been given in the past through various plans that have been passed and supported by council versus the ability of elected members of the city to at least review the list that's been put together by our senior staff and at least have some input to that. Doesn't mean I have any intention of going through all the different items and trying to make it River Ward focused, because this is about the city and putting priority projects on the list, but it's that balance between having the elected members of this council provide input versus redoing everything that a lot of the plans and studies have gone through in the past. And we've done that before. We've been asked our opinion to provide last year the Canada 150 infrastructure dollars, where we were asked to identify projects in our wards, which then got fed into a city submission, and of course we do that at budget as well. So I support, Mr. Mayor, the list before us. I did have a number of questions that I sent to staff over the last couple of weeks, and I appreciate the detailed response that I got back from them. One thing that I'll just repeat, I'm not going to obviously go through all the questions, but one that I want to underline is there's a specific project in my ward that talks about a very specific bicycle link on Hunt Club Road. Hunt Club, of course, is a very busy road. We do have bike lanes on the sides, but when you get to Beausville Road heading westbound between Beausville and Riverside, the bike lane ends, like on many of our streets. And this was a bit of a surprise for many, because although that bike lane needs to be completed for Riverside, and I appreciate that's going to be done, there appears in the ward many more other higher priority bike lanes that need to be completed in the ward. And that's where, if I had had the opportunity much earlier on, just to get staff's perspective on how how a Hunt Club bike lane gets priority over a Walkley or a Brookfield or a Riverside or other streets in the area, which, in my opinion, can actually be used by more cyclists, are within residential communities, and are in significant need. Those are the types of things we can have a greater debate rather than dragging out a council meeting. So, again, I appreciate the information provided. I think the answers to the questions today have been very useful during this debate. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor DeRose.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm the last guy on the list here. I'll make it very short and quick, but I just want to second Councillor Shantiri addressing that we're very happy to see safe cycling for our rural areas. And I'm not meaning only me, because I know many residents in my ward and many residents in the city of Ottawa always give us compliment and comment about rural road and safe cycling. So, and we have incident and accident all the time. So I'm really, really pleased to see all these initiatives within the list. But also, I hear some of my colleagues talking about different projects and list and wish list. These are not these lists, they've been in front of us for a long time, and we're all aware about them, and I'm really pleased to see most of them is coming to, we're getting some funding for them. And my colleague John Cloutier and I, we were just talking just before all the comment that we're really impressed, and we've been talking to staff, and we've been asking staff since we knew about the funding coming to be prepared and to put all their duck in a row, making sure having all their project together so we are be able to deliver on time, to making sure we receive as maximum money from the funding. And Councillor Cloutier and myself, we're very happy, we're very pleased. We thank staff for their hard work with the short time that the provincial, for the government that gave them for them to put all these lists together. So we're very happy to see the list. We're very happy to see the funding coming through. We really appreciate all their hard work. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you, Councillor DeRose. And just very briefly, I too want to echo what the councillors have said about the staff effort under very tight timelines. They produced the list, and in every single case, it was a council-approved policy, TMP, cycling plan, items that have been in the wish list, if you will, for some time, but we've never had the funding for it. So this has been a great example of the new cooperative approach between levels of government. And we see government that brought to the table, and I thank Minister McKenna for the announcement. A number of you were at that announcement on Fifth Avenue. I thank her, and I thanked her and the National Capital Caucus and Minister Sohi yesterday when I met with them, because a lot of these projects have been on the wish we could do list for a long time. And while not every project is on the list, we also understand that there were a number of criteria that the Government of Canada established, particularly the tight timeline, because this is really an economic stimulus program to get people to work as quickly as possible in a condensed period of time. And then, of course, the larger transit funding announcements, our request for the $1.15 billion is coming up after this program is completed. So it has been I think, a very positive experience that these projects that really are good basic infrastructure that cover all parts of the city. And my role was to look at the list from a geographic point of view to ensure that not all of the money was in one part of the city and the rest of the city was left without projects. And a good example of that, for instance, is the addition of more buses. We know that there's some extremely fast-growing areas. I can name off some of them. Riverside South, Barrhaven, Canada, where there is tremendous growth, but there are not enough buses. We know in Orleans, highest use of bus transit per capita in the entire city. Often people will never get a seat on the bus because it's so crammed. So this is a particular project that benefits all parts of the city. I think the rural paving area was something that I certainly am very supportive of, as are the rural councillors. We have a lot of people in the urban core that want to go out to farmers markets and visit farms and visit rural fairs, but we don't have the cycling capacity because the shoulders are not paved. And we have rural residents that want to cycle within their communities, and it's just not safe going on some of those roads because the shoulders aren't paved. So I encourage people to support this recommendation, and I thank very much our staff for the long hours in a relatively short period of time. And I think we heard wise counsel from our solicitor that the suggestion that was put forward that we simply email these lists and have a discussion that way is illegal under the Municipal Act. So on the report, yeas and nays, please.
Councillor Wilkinson? Councillor El Shantiri?
Yes.
Councillor Moffat?
Yes.
Conseiller Cloutier?
Oui.
Conseiller Manette?
Oui.
Councillor Hubley?
Yes.
Councillor Chernyshenko?
Yes.
Councillor DeRose?
Yes.
Councillor Harder?
Yes.
Councillor Shirelli?
Yes.
Councillor McKenney?
Yes.
Councillor Eglai?
Yes.
Councillor Tierney? Councillor Kadri?
Yes.
Councillor Taylor?
Yes.
Councillor Leeper?
Yes.
Councillor Middick?
Yes.
Councillor Brockington?
Yes.
Councillor Kakish?
Yes.
Conseiller Blais?
Oui.
Councillor Deans?
Yes.
Councillor Fleury?
Oui.
Councillor Nussbaum?
Yes.
Mayor Watson?
Oui.
22 yeas.
Thank you. Disposition of items approved by committees under delegated authority, suite à donner des articles ratifiés par les comités en vertu de pouvoirs délégués. Carried. Motion to adopt reports. Motion portant adoption de rapport. Councillor Middick, seconded by Councillor Cloutier, please.
Thank you, Mayor. That the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report 19 Alpha, Finance and Economic Development Committee Report 17, Planning Committee Report 31, and Transportation Committee Report 17 be received and adopted as amended.
Carried. Motions of which notice have been previously given. Motion dont avait été donnée entièrement. Councillor El Shantiri has a motion, seconded by Councillor Moffat, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this motion, the Municipal Council Support Resolution Independent Electricity System Operator, known IESO feed-in-turn program. There's two portions of this motion, Mr. Mayor, if I can read it just to put it in the context. Whereas the Independent Electricity System Operator feed-in-turn FIT program awards priority point to rooftop solar generation projects that receive and formal support of local municipality. And whereas on August 26, 2015, Council approved motion number 16/7, a municipal council support resolution for rooftop solar generation project in Ottawa. And whereas this resolution is valid for 12 months and must be renewed annually, and that participant may receive priority point under the IESO FIT program higher priority ranking. Therefore, be it resolved that Council approve the IESO update municipal council support resolution contained in Appendix A. And in Appendix A, Mr. Mayor, that therefore be it resolved that Council of the City of Ottawa support the construction and operation of the project anywhere in the City of Ottawa. Therefore, be it resolved that this resolution, sole purpose of it to enable the participant in the FIT program to receive priority point under the FIT program and may not be used for the purpose of any other from municipal approval in relation to the application of project or any other purpose. Be it further resolved that this resolution shall expire 12 months after this adoption by Council. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Moffat.
Okay, so we'd talked about this in the past. On the resolution, carried. Thank you, Councillor El Shantiri and Moffat. The next motion is moved by Councillor Leeper, seconded by myself. Councillor Leeper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A small motion to allow a local restaurant to install fold-back windows that would otherwise be not permitted under our encroachment rules. The motion reads, whereas the owner of the Wellington Diner at 1385 Wellington Street West has applied for a building permit for alterations to his restaurant building, and whereas the plan submitted proposes folding accordion windows that, when open, would encroach on the city's right-of-way, and whereas the city's use and care of roads bylaw and encroachment encroachment bylaw prohibit this type of permanent encroachment on the city's right-of-way, preventing the building permit from being issued, and whereas the August meeting of the Transportation Committee was canceled and the building permit is currently on hold pending resolution of this issue, therefore be it resolved that Council approve waivers to both the city's use and care of roads bylaw and encroachment bylaw to permit the proposed accordion windows as a permanent encroachment on the city's right-of-way abutting 1385 Wellington Street West, subject to the proponent entering into an agreement with the city and paying related annual encroachment fees. Thank you very much for your support on this one, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. On the motion, carried, adopté, merci. Motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure, motion exigeant la suspension des règles de procédure. Are there any? None. Notice of motion for consideration of subsequent meeting. Avis de motion pour l'examen en réunion subséquente. Councillor Leeper, seconded by Councillor Brockington with respect to a noise exemption.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Next council meeting, I'll be seeking a noise exemption for the Ottawa or the Heart Research construction. They need to basically receive one load of rebar early in the morning. The noise exemption is something that is sorted out with the community association, the hospital, and some residents. It solves a number of issues for us. So,
did you want to waive the rules of procedure now?
You know what? Sure. Yes, may I waive the rules of procedure?
I think it's pretty standard. On suspension of the rules, carried.
So the motion then would be where?
Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Notice of motion. Any other notices of motion for consideration of subsequent meeting? Des autres? Notice of intent, avis d'intention, notice of intent from the Ottawa Community Lands Development Corporation to hold the annual general meeting of the shareholder at the City Council meeting scheduled for September 28, 2016. Avis d'intention de la Société de Mangement des Terrains Communautaires d'Ottawa de tenir son assemblée générale annuelle à la réunion du Conseil prévue le 28 septembre 2016. Motion to introduce bylaws, motion portant présentation de règlement. Conseiller Médec, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mayor. That the bylaws listed on the agenda under motion to introduce bylaws, 3 readings be read and passed. Carried.
Adopté. Confirmation bylaw, règlement de ratification, Conseiller Médec et Cloutier.
That the following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting of 14 September 2016.
Carried.
Carried.
Any written inquiries, Madam Deputy Clerk? Adjournment. Councillor Minnick.
Thank you, Mayor. That the proceedings of the City Council meeting of September 14th, 2016 be adjourned.
Carried. Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Merci.